You gave up your weekends. You canceled plans with people who actually wanted you there. You swallowed your opinions to keep the peace. You put their comfort above your own so many times it started to feel normal. And then they left. Not after a big blow-up, not after some clear betrayal. They just drifted, made new friends, found new priorities, stopped calling. And when you finally looked up and realized they were gone, the thing that hurt most wasn't just the loss. It was the math. You gave everything, and they left anyway. And instead of feeling angry, you started wondering what you did wrong. Maybe you should have done more. But that's the wrong question, because the problem was never that you gave too little. The problem is that you gave in a way that slowly destroyed the thing you were trying to protect. Here's what nobody tells you. When you sacrifice too much for someone, you don't make them love you more. You make them respect you less. Not because they're cruel, not because they don't have a heart, but because of something deep in human nature that none of us fully escape. We don't value what costs us nothing, not as a harsh judgment, as a fact about how people work. When something is always available, always adjusting, always bending, the mind stops seeing it as precious. It starts seeing it as expected. And what is expected is never truly appreciated. You weren't just giving your time and energy. You were teaching them, slowly, quietly, without a single word, exactly how much you believed you were worth. And they learned the lesson well. You weren't giving out of fullness. Be honest with yourself about that. You were giving to keep them, giving to make sure they stayed, giving because some quiet fear inside you whispered that if you stopped, they would go. And that fear is understandable. It comes from a real place, but it poisons everything it touches, because love given from fear doesn't feel like love to the other person. It feels like pressure. It feels like a debt they never agreed to carry. You thought you were building a bridge, but what you were actually building was a cage, and you were the one inside it. There's a reason the philosopher Lao Tzu wrote that the man who tries to hold water in a clenched fist loses it faster than the man who lets it rest in an open palm. The tighter you grip through sacrifice, through overgiving, through making yourself indispensable, the faster things slip away. Not because the other person is ungrateful, but because pressure pushes people back, always. So the giving that was supposed to pull them closer was quietly doing the opposite. But losing them wasn't even the worst part. When you sacrifice constantly, something else happens. The version of you they first notice, the one with opinions, with edges, with a life of their own, that person starts to disappear, slowly at first. Then faster. You cancel your plans, you drop your hobbies, you stop saying what you actually think. You shape yourself around them like water filling a container. And one day they look at you and something feels off. They can't name it, but the energy is gone. The tension that made things interesting has been replaced by something flat, something too easy. The person they were drawn to has been replaced by someone whose entire world revolves around them. That is not attractive. That is not comforting. That is suffocating. Not because they don't care about you, but because nobody falls in love with their own reflection. Nobody stays for someone who has quietly erased themselves. You thought shrinking made you easier to love. It made you easier to leave. And the person you were doing it all for, they weren't grateful. They were suffocating. The person receiving too much doesn't just become comfortable. They become uncomfortable. This sounds backwards, but stay with it. When someone gives endlessly time, energy, forgiveness, attention, the person on the receiving end starts to feel something they can't quite explain. A low hum of guilt. A sense that the ledger is unbalanced and will never be even. And guilt, left to sit long enough, doesn't turn into gratitude. It turns into resentment. They start to pull back. Not because they stop caring, but because being around you reminds them of a debt they can never repay. You became a mirror for everything they haven't given back. And people don't like looking at that mirror, so they find reasons to look away. They find reasons to be somewhere else. They find reasons to leave. And you are left wondering what you did wrong, when the truth is you did too much, and it costs you everything. And here is the part that will make you rethink every moment you said it's fine when it wasn't. They didn't take from you because they were selfish. They took because you made it the rule. Every time you said it's fine when it wasn't, you set a rule. Every time you pushed your own needs to the side, you set a rule. Every time you showed up for them when they didn't show up for you, you set a rule. And people follow rules. Not out of malice, just out of habit. Just because that's the pattern you laid down from the very beginning, you trained them quietly, without meaning to. And once a pattern is set deep enough, it stops feeling like a choice. It just feels like how things are. So when you finally hit your limit, when you finally got tired and needed something back, it felt to them like you had changed, like you were suddenly asking for something unreasonable. Because in the world you had built together, your needs had never been part of the deal. That's not their fault entirely. That's a pattern two people built together, and you were the one holding the blueprint. Think of the last person you bent yourself in half for. Did they ever ask you to do that? Or did you just start doing it one day like never stop? That answer tells you everything. Because the right people don't make you shrink to keep them. They show up for the version of you that takes up space. And if someone only stayed while you were making yourself small, they were never staying for you. And here is what sits underneath all of that giving. You weren't afraid of losing them. You were afraid of what losing them would confirm. That maybe you weren't enough. That maybe without the sacrifice, without being useful, without being needed, there was nothing left worth staying for. That fear is not weakness, but it is a lie. And you've been paying for a debt that was never real. That is the wound. Everything else, the leaving, the being taken for granted, the resentment, the slow disappearing, all of it was just a symptom of that one belief sitting quietly in your chest. The belief that you were not enough as you are. And no amount of sacrifice fixes that belief. Only you can do that from the inside. By deciding, not once, but over and over again, that your presence alone is the thing of value. Not your usefulness, not your flexibility, not how much you can carry for someone else. Just you, exactly as you are. When you stop performing, something happens that you won't expect. People stop taking from you. Not because you became colder, because you became real. And real is harder to walk away from than useful ever was. You didn't lose them because you loved them too much. You lost them because you made love look like desperation. And desperation never kept anyone. You don't need to love less. You need to stop using love as a currency. Stop spending yourself to buy safety. Stop shrinking to earn a place that was always yours to begin with. The people worth keeping never needed you to sacrifice yourself to stay. And the ones who left after everything you gave, they were never staying for you. They were staying for what you gave them. The moment you understand that difference, everything changes. You were never too much. You were just pouring yourself into people who had already decided how little they needed to give back. You already know this. You've known it for a while. If this hits something real in you, if you recognize yourself somewhere in these words, subscribe. Because everything on this channel is built for people who are done being easy to leave.